You're listening to Ember Weekend, your weekend recap of all things Ember. This is episode 52. I'm Chase McCarthy.
And I'm Jonathan Jackson, and we're here to keep you in the Ember run loop. We're broadcasting from HashRocket HQ, and today's episode is called See You at EmberConf, which is kind of true. I mean, we'll see some of you at EmberConf. We're also recording this, we're releasing this the day of EmberConf, so technically you could just turn around and maybe see us. I don't know.
Yeah, we might be talking to you right now.
Right now. It might, yeah, like in real time. It's also our anniversary. It's the first year of Ember Weekend. As of this recording, it was yesterday. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, Thursday. I think it was the 24th of March the last time. I think last time it was right after EmberConf, I believe.
Yeah. We started shortly after EmberConf. We were about 3 months in maybe when Wicked Good rolled around, which was pretty great. So. Yeah, maybe 10 episodes in, 15 episodes in at Wicked Good last year.
Memories.
Yeah, so episode 52, though, that's 1 year. I'm excited. Here's to another. So the first thing we want to mention is a new stubbing library called testdouble. You've probably used sign-on in the past, and this is kind of in the same vein, but it's designed to address many of the concerns around friction points in Sign-On's API. It's from a company called testdouble out in Ohio, and they're a consultancy doing a lot of really cool stuff with Ember, Ruby, and JavaScript at large. And it's headed up by Justin Searles. You probably are familiar with him from his Twitter stream or from one of his many presentations from RailsConf, and I think he's been to a few JSConfs and stuff like that. So testdouble is like I said, it's designed to kind of address some of the friction points in Sign-On. Sign-On has been around for a long time, and if you're heavily into testing, you've probably used it. Testdouble, its new API is kind of simpler. It's more sleek. It has some really cool things around replacing global node modules. The API is pretty simple. You get testdouble function and testdouble object, and those are essentially your test doubles. And you're able to pass those around, and you can use td.when to actually set up either expectations or to kind of stub them out to return certain things. So you can pass a testdouble function to testdouble when and say, okay, well, when you receive this argument, I want you to then return, some other object, some known object. Or you can say then do, execute this function, or you can say then throw to throw. And there's a whole lot more to the API. I'm obviously only covering the high level stuff, but it's been really interesting for me to go through all these docs and kind of poke around in the testdouble stuff. So I'm really excited to try this in my next project. The documentation is one of the things I really wanted to mention here because it's so well done. There's just a ton of it, and it not only explains kind of how, but also why. And I think that's really a powerful thing when you're coming into a new library, especially one that has as many nuances as, a testdouble library. So yeah, so I definitely recommend checking out this library. And I think there's also a blog post, a pretty in-depth one, kind of showing how it distinguishes itself from Sign-On and why you might want to use testdouble over it. And so we'll link to that and to the repo. Here at HashRocket, we spend a lot of time testing. And we spend a lot of time tweaking our Vim configs. All of us here, I believe, use Vim pretty much exclusively. It's a pairing shop, so having a unified editor is really important to us, and a uniform kind of development environment in general. So we've spent a lot of time tweaking our dot files and all this other stuff. And recently, Torin mentioned to me a Vim workshop that a friend of his is running. And that's high praise that he would recommend this because he was so wonderful at Vim for his EmberConf talk last year. And I believe he's doing a training this year as well. So I don't know. I wanted to just mention it really quickly and say, hey, if you're looking to brush up on some Vim skills and get and kind of level up a little bit, I believe it's called Flattening the Vim Learning Curve. So it's really designed at bringing new people on board to Vim in a way that kind of will help them develop good patterns and good habits so that they can be much more prolific, or not prolific, what's the word here?
Proficient?
proficient. That's the word. With your editor, you spend so much time in your editor. I really think that having a solid workflow is very important. Over the long haul, the editor being something that you don't really have to think about is a really powerful thing for a developer. So I'm really excited to mention it.
Right, and it seems like Jared's got a few libraries on GitHub and things that revolve around configuring dot files and setting up plugins. So there's actually a portion of this class that it seems to be revolving around like setting up macros, increasing your own productivity, because that's kind of part of the allure of Vim is customizing it to suit your development style, the types of projects you work on, just personal habits. So, everybody has a little bit of a different configuration, so you usually can't just drop into somebody's dot files and be 100% satisfied. So there's always room to customize.
Yeah, cut out those keystrokes,
So as we mentioned earlier, EmberConf is right around the corner. We're leaving, 2 days from now, getting on a plane, going out to Portland.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We need to mention that there's a mixer. If you are listening to this in the midday, is it a Tuesday? It might be Tuesday. We're going to release on Monday. So the mixer, if you are in Portland and or at EmberConf, you should come out to the community dinner and drinks thing. It's hosted by basically everyone. Ember Weekend is on the list somewhere, but like a lot of people, a bunch of different meetups are hosting, and other consultancies, Ember Sherpa. It's going to be really cool. I think it'll be a lot of fun to just go out there and just kind of mingle and get to know some people. I'd like to put some names to faces and faces to names. I don't know which direction it goes, but it'll definitely be cool. And obviously, I'm excited about the talks at EmberConf. I suspect there are going to be some very difficult decisions because it's multi-track this year instead of a single track. So, I don't know. I'm really excited about EmberConf.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. The only concern we have, I think, is that we may not have enough stickers. So partly due to the run-up for EmberConf, we've been trying to do a lot of work on the site and restructure some things, make changes that we've kind of been planning on doing for basically the last year. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the progress we've made and some of the stumbling blocks we've hit and kind of where this is all going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to be kind of a long section, so kind of strap in here. The first thing is kind of like where we started at. Obviously, we knew we were going to do the podcast for a good period of time, hopefully, a long time. But when we first did it, we just wanted to get stuff out the door, and I kept on telling Chase, I'm sure he remembers this and probably hates that I say it, but I would say perfect is the enemy of good. So we shipped out Ember Weekend very quickly without design, and it looked kind of ugly for a few episodes there. But we did it. And the initial rendition, we actually we did a lot of experimental kind of things in Ember, including using Chase's own template language called HBars, which is basically HAML for HTML bars.
Yeah. Don't do that. That's
it's
really
cool.
bad idea.
It is cool, but it's kind of like Emblem. It's just kind of fell out of fashion because HTML bars is just, I don't know. I feel like the API is a little easier because you're so familiar with HTML.
Right, and that's kind of like the whole point of Ember is, you have conventions, you have a way to do it. Just do it the normal way, so that when anybody else comes, to your project, they can just contribute and they don't go, I've never used this weird templating language and I don't know how this is working.
And that caused a lot of problems. Obviously, that was really motivated because we have some designers here who write templates and they like to use HAML, so we wanted to make sure that they had a good transition experience moving over to Ember, but it ended up being better to use HTML bars. So that led us to kind of the realization around Wicked Good, which, as we mentioned a little earlier, was probably like around the 15th, 20th episode or so, that the template solution wasn't really going to work long term for show notes, and we really needed to actually start thinking about what data was constant, because we ended up having to add a new template every time, and it was really challenging. So we decided that we would try to create some structure around the things that stay the same and the things that are different. And we ended up coming with an object model that was pretty shallow and relied a little bit on the fact that Ember Data will take any complex object you give it to an adder, and it will just serialize it. It'll call JSON stringify and JSON parse. So we ended up with this kind of flat structure, but it ended up working, and we put all this stuff into prod fixtures. We're going to mention this, but we live coded the move from moving all the files over to be inside of a JSON file to actually using Mirage as our in production way of getting data into Ember data, basically bootstrapping.
Right, and we did this partly because we wanted the content of the show to be like kind of like you would do a blog post in a GitHub repo and have people be able to submit a PR or whatever. We wanted to be it to be out there public for people to be able to see the content and catch us on like mistakes or correct a link or something if something changed. Which we did have a few of those. People come and say this is the actual link, or this isn't my screen name, or just something to that effect. So it did kind of work, but it kind of falls in itself once that file got over 4,000 lines or something.
Yeah, 4,000 is when we started seeing some pretty annoying performance problems. And now it's at 6,000 or so. The data model is basically episodes, show notes, and that's it, right? I mean, it's just episodes and show notes.
Right. Yeah. Because basically what we're calling now authors were just mentioned. We had nesting inside of show notes, so technically we had another resource that was embedded inside.
Right.
But those were just duplicated. We could have shared them and had another file that was authors and
so
referenced those by ID.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Since we've been moving over to a real backend, which we're going to talk about in a second, we found that despite the fact that we have some 482 different show note resources, which basically means a thing we mentioned on the show that has a timestamp to a place that we talked about it. Of the 400 and something, almost 500 of those, there are only 140 authors. So 140 people are responsible for all of those things. So that's how often we have repeat people. So like, for instance, I know Taras, Ember Sherpa, is featured several times because of like things like Global Ember Meetup, and he's very involved. Well, he's mentioned several times, and before we were just copying it. We were creating a brand new thing each time, and now we've realized that we really have a new resource there, and everything that references something that Taras has done needs to reference that resource.
Right, and so we have come up with I think a better data model. But it's interesting that we came up with it after letting it kind of sit for a year and really thinking about it and coming up with every possible use case. Because I know in the beginning we had templates because we were like, well, what if somebody releases some library and we really want to try it out? We want to embed a little piece on that show note that demonstrates the library that we're talking about. And that literally never happened.
Yeah.
So
not because we didn't want it to happen, but because it's just, embedding that sort of thing is something that we probably want to do, but it just ends up we have to ship it, there are actual real constraints because we have, basically a self-imposed deadline of every Monday we release.
Right. And we have, and there's also, the site works on mobile devices, it's a responsive website. So if we just embedded something there, it may look fine on a browser, but not look good on a phone. And so we had, every time we tried to add something to customize those cells, we had to do a lot of work. So it means that each show note that we wanted to add a custom thing to would have its own, little bugs and stuff that we'd have to fix later and just eat into all our time.
So it didn't really make sense. And moving over to the fixture file was one thing. We got everything moved over. We came up with that around Wicked Good last year. And then we put Mirage there. So the default scenario of Mirage gets run on boot if you opt into that. We did that in production. And it basically loops over those files that are just exported in utils, and it puts them into the Mirage database. And then then the rest of our app just uses Ember data to fetch it. And the jQuery requests are all being intercepted by Mirage and handled appropriately. So there's a Mirage config, and Mirage performed admirably here. And this is one of the reasons why I think Chase and I are both so impressed with the direction of Mirage, because we've seen it kind of evolve, because originally we were kind of doing everything with a REST adapter, just basically manually handling all the stuff. And since we've started switching over to JSON API, Mirage now handles a lot of stuff with the ORM layer, which we're going to talk about in a second.
Okay. So do you want?
Sorry,
you could have just transitioned.
No,
to
I know.
Sorry.
I'm trying to think, and I wanted to pause. So actually, this brings up a really good good point. It's kind of a thing that we need to mention because it is something that you'll experience if you do any Ember development. I've actually been responsible for doing most of the front end work. Actually, all of the transition work. I didn't remodel the data. I think Chase did that. But I've been doing all of the switches or changes on the front end side, and including the import script, which involves parsing through those prod fixtures that we mentioned earlier and putting them into a backend, which I may link to a thing. I'm not super proud of it. It's very procedural and it's kind of gross to put it into the backend. But yeah, so there's actually a back and forth here because Chase has been designing this backend in Elixir, and I've been learning a little bit of Elixir, but Chase has done the vast majority of it, and it's a mostly compliant JSON API backend, which is like super cool. So I've been able to leverage all these really amazing things that Ember Data has been doing in the front end, and then I get to say, oh hey, I have this working with Mirage, with 02x Mirage, and I've set up my associations, and everything seems to work. Here is my Mirage config, and I've handed it to Chase, and he's able to look at it and go back and forth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we're learning now about JSON API that we knew that there were standards around it and that would help somewhat, but now knowing exactly what kinds of things you can do, it's pretty powerful. One of the things I've been really impressed with is the ability to kind of scope what includes you want from the client, so the client can pass an include param, and then the backend will say, okay, you want some nested resource to be returned with that thing you're asking for. So in our case, like on the episode show page, we want to request an episode by ID or slug, and we want the ability to say we want you to include or not include the show notes, and we can actually control that from the front end in a secure way, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, the include thing blew my mind. Sam Selikoff actually has helped me doing the transition on the front end. So we wanted the transition to be kind of atomic in each step. So I moved it from using 01x Mirage to 02x Mirage and kept everything working. And then in the process of doing that, we realized that we had to implement a REST adapter, or no, a REST serializer in Mirage, 02x Mirage, and that's been merged in, which is super cool. Sam was super helpful in that regard. And then I removed the REST API without doing any data remodeling. I removed the REST API and put the JSON API adapter in there, and then got everything working again. And then once I got the JSON API adapter in, I was able to basically turn Mirage off and start hitting the real backend. And that process of trying to do each of these different steps in succession with each commit being kind of isolated has been really cool. And one of the problems was that we had to reseed the data. So once we did and then I did the remodeling of the data. The remodeling of the data is something that Chase can talk about because he actually came up with like the different things that we needed. But when we remodeled the data, the default scenario that, as we mentioned before, is how we were seeding Ember data on initial load, had to be altered. And the new object structure ended up being a little bit more intensive, both memory and just overall performance. We had to loop over show notes and loop over individual objects inside show notes. And so it actually increased the load time considerably because now we're kind of running into the bottlenecks around having a rather complex object graph. And now we're running into the edges of where Mirage in production is feasible.
Right, and that's mostly because we went from having like 400 objects plus 50 episodes to being like, okay, well now we have a show note object, like resource, and we have a resource, and we have a author or person. We have various other things. We actually have to add a couple more. And once you start doing that, the number of things that Mirage was having to create on startup were, we're kind of just choking the system. So obviously, this is not something we're going to push, but it's, highlighted the fact that we were on the edge of being forced to move to a real backend anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of this, just as an aside that I'm just going to throw away as a comment, a lot of this is being driven by the fact that we want to pull fastboot over, and there are some things that we have to do, including have a backend in order for us to do that. So that's kind of neither here nor there, but that's part of it. But this problem has been apparent since we hit about 4,000 show notes, or 4,000 line on the show note file. And it's basically meant that our load times went from being really, really fast to taking a second. And now when I switched it over to the new remodeled data, noticed rather unfortunately, I kept on thinking it was Chrome, but our load time went from being about a second to being about 18 seconds. And that's kind of absurd.
Yeah, and one of the really interesting things that hit us was that we realized that even though on the index page for episodes we weren't returning included show notes for each one of those, we realized that in order for the relationships to still exist, so that Ember knows what show notes exist for an episode, there is in JSON API there's a relationships section for each episode. And so if you have 400 and some odd, show notes, there's actually, like a little, and not just an ID, but like a little JSON object in there that is representing the relationship for every one of them, regardless of whether you asked for them. And since our show notes are really just a timestamp plus that, it was like almost like every, there was no way getting around having to touch each one of those. So it's interesting just seeing that JSON API, there are some considerations being made now. If you have like some record that has 20,000 relationships with something else, you can't even return the relationships of that because that alone will just bog down the query.
Yeah, that was a kind of an interesting insight that I was definitely not expecting.
Yeah, because we noticed at Mirage that even on the index page was having to spend some time looking at the because we actually used the the debugging tools to see what was being called, and we were noticing that there was a lot of CPU cycles being spent on that one section of serializing the actual, because JSON API is a pretty complex structure. It's not as simple as the old style, just active model kind of style, where you have like an array of IDs. That's pretty simple. That's like almost the simplest you can get. Well, now they're much more complex documents.
Yeah, and speaking of complex documents, finding out how to do creates and updates with complex relationships being included has been really challenging, especially in Elixir. But that's kind of an aside. It was very challenging for me to kind of find out exactly like where and what you can send and how you have to interact with some of the more intricate JSON API actions.
So one of the really cool things about this is that we're splitting up the work and kind of not pairing on it unless it's absolutely necessary. And so John's tackling all of the front end concerns, like the moving over to the JSON API on the front end, migrating all the Mirage stuff. In the meantime, I've been working on all the back end stuff, which is all the Elixir API things. And that's pretty nice because Elixir's complicated. It's similar enough to Ruby and stuff, and Phoenix is similar enough to Rails that you can do it, but it's kind of difficult for two people to do it at once when you don't really know what you're doing. So we've started now integrating this work where I have opinion of what the back end is going to look like and what I think the front end would look like, and then John's got his opinion of what the front end's looking like, and we're having to now mesh up our ideas, even though we've agreed maybe on the what the structure is going to look like. Something very simple like what thing gets included on what page, or what things get kind of like side loaded, end up like biting you, where you don't realize something's a problem until you actually go to do that integration and you realize nothing works. But something that was really interesting is that there are a lot of times where, because of JSON API's kind of like really structured format, there are ways to do things. There are multiple ways to do things. So you can just flip a flag and say, well, you know what? We don't have something implemented on the back end yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this flag, and now every show note will get requested one at a time. But as soon as the backend implements this one cool feature, now they'll all get coalesced into one return. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed that, especially like how flexible it is.
Yeah, and it's cool because you're able to just verify with Mirage, because Mirage supports out of the box, that you can flip it on and everything works in the front end, and that Mirage simulates it. So you know that JSON API does support that in the fashion that you've implemented it. So all I have to do now on the back end is implement that, and you can just flip the flag and it'll work. And there's no question. We don't have to sit and discuss, well, what's the best way to do it? Because the way you do it, I think, is saying like filter ID, and then you give a comma separate list of IDs. It's already figured out. We don't have to argue about it. We don't have to, have some committee, on it. It's just going to be this way because there is a standard, and that's really cool.
Yeah, having the standard to just point to and reference, and even if we're working completely separately, we're both looking at the same JSONAPI.org to verify that our things are correct. And Mirage has been this tool that I've been able to constantly work against. And I know that I have kind of built-in checks there because that's also very compliant with the JSON API spec. So I'm really pleased with the specification JSON API.
Right. Yeah, we haven't dug into any of the paging or metadata stuff yet, but I have a feeling that stuff's gonna be really nice to mess with, and we're gonna need that pretty soon because at some point we're gonna have to start paging just the episodes that show up or something like that. So and hopefully like when the blog comes in, the blog posts themselves, probably we don't want to load every blog post, so we'll have to page something. So there's a lot more to the spec that we still have to learn. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's been a really great learning experience, and obviously all this is open source. So if any of this stuff is perking your ears up, you are more than welcome to come in there, ask us questions, go file issues, or whatever. We will definitely make sure that we are very active and engaged there. So if you have any questions, feel free. Also, if you're interested in learning Elixir, Chase has done a wonderful job of trying to make sure that all of his endpoints are tested in a way that I've been able to actually go in there and look directly at the expected response for, say, like a creator update, and then make sure that my adapter is sending that exact document. So I just know it'll work. Like, I know his test pass, I know I'm sending the right stuff, I know it works. It's been really fun to work that way. It's not quite the design by contract stuff that Sam mentioned with the what's that document called? I think it's called consumer driven contracts. Yeah, it's not quite that, but definitely it's been a really good experience to pull these things together and just have all those tests there. So if you're looking to learn Elixir, specifically Phoenix, it might be a really good place to look. I know that there are not many examples of how to do a JSON API that are open source right now in Elixir, so it's definitely a good resource.
Right, and there's a full CRUD cycle, so you can see all of the ways that things could be done. Probably not the best because, like I said, just learning this. So any feedback would also be welcome, but just know that especially the tests, they're very, very verbose. Specifically because of what John was saying, I wanted him to be able to look at the files and see exactly what the request would be and exactly what the response would be. There have been some efforts in some libraries to not have to repeat all that every time you do a test, but it was actually intentional so that you could clearly see what was going in and out of the system. But there are, if you actually end up using this for like a very complicated app, you'd probably want to make some abstractions around there.
Yeah. But it's been a really good learning experience. We're hoping to have this delivered by EmberConf, so you guys can actually look at it and actually kind of fiddle around with it. The best thing is that the website will be blazingly fast again. Yeah, much faster. Yeah.
When we first started this, I was showing John some of the responses from seeded data. So this was actually hitting the database and returning a nested resource from test data that I was putting together. And he's like, "What's that little symbol right there?" And I was like, "That's the micro symbol. That's microseconds."
Yeah. That was wild. And and since then, since I've been seeding the data, I've been getting like 4 millisecond creates which means that it does a full authentication and also inserts into the database and returns in 4 milliseconds, which has been pretty cool.
Right, and these aren't even the most efficient queries. They're like when we do nested resources, we have to make, I don't know, like two or three different queries to create one record and then do two other inserts into a join table. That's all happening in a transaction and everything, but it's still, it's multiple creates. Sometimes there's actually some n+1 queries and things going on, but they're so fast that it's like I really don't want to spend the time trying to figure out how to make those optimized when that's not really the bottleneck.
Yeah. It's definitely an impressive thing. I've been really pleased, especially considering I'm coming from a Rails backend, and this is a different paradigm. It's functional, not object oriented. It's been cool to see, like, just, I don't know, like it still feels kind of familiar, I guess, is what I'm getting at, which feels good.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
Should be done really soon.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be done by the time you listen to this. That would be ideal. If you go to the website and you see a network request, it means it's done, because as of right now, Mirage intercepts all of those. So if you see it and you see a network request, it's up. Okay, and then so I also want to spend maybe 5 minutes talking about the kind of the goals. So we made all these changes. A lot of this was just to learn. A lot of it was for performance, and a lot of it was just for fun, honestly. But we do have goals, like long-term goals. One of them is to have a self-hosted blog. So a while ago, we started blogging to TIL, and then we wrote this kind of neat adapter layer that would go and fetch it and parse it and put it into Ember data as a blog post. But that's going to cause some problems with fast boot. So that's not a very feasible thing long term. But it was great, and Jake Worth worked with us on that, getting TIL information and some things like that. He's the one who actually wrote TIL. So one of the goals is going to be self-hosted blog, and in that blog we want to use mobile doc, which is something that we discussed with Matthew Beal on a Modern Web podcast, which we can link to, and the potential for guest blogs as well, so that we could have people, friends of the show who say, oh, hey, here's a neat trick. It'd be really nice if we could say, okay, hey, just blog it here, and we'll make sure to mention it on the show. We could do like self-references, so we can say inside of the blog post, we could say, oh, it's mentioned that here's a timestamp, and you can click that button, and it would start playing in the player. So that's a pretty cool idea.
Right. And then another part of that kind of ties into it is that now we have to have authentication. So if we want to have some kind of admin panel, we have to do some work with basically having multiple Ember apps. We kind of made the choice to do that, to keep the this Ember application simple, and also kind of just to try this idea of having multiple Ember apps hitting the same API, maintained separately, and just see how that's going to work. So we've already done some examples and things with OAuth and Ember, so pretty confident in all that. And actually all the OAuth stuff's already working in the back end. That was actually really simple. So that's going to give us the ability to have administrator roles and guest roles and things like that. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I it makes me think now that we should probably also look into engines, because that might be a potential solution where we could say, oh, when I'm local, I want to use the admin panel and still have it be part of the repo. But yeah, separate repos still is kind of like what I'm thinking right now. But yeah, there's a lot there in the admin panel, because we want it to be a fun experience for us to do the notes. So we've been doing notes on a Google Doc, and then we spend time on Monday morning, and we pull them into the show note JSON, and then that gets pushed out. And that's actually really time consuming. So a lot of the admin panel's goal is going to be to make that much faster process for us. So that's definitely up there on the goals. And then obviously the last thing that we want to mention is that we definitely want to extract some add-ons, including the audio player, which is kind of gnarly, but it's been really great. It's the thing at the very bottom where you press play, spacebar, and it'll play. You can do a playhead drag and a few other things, and it's been really fun to pull together. But it's really like kind of embedded. It's baked into the system, and it'd be really nice to pull that out into an add-on so that it can be used by other people, and also so that we maybe can pull something out of this that's useful to other people.
Right, and that way, I think if it was used by more people, there might be a little bit more work done on it, because I know people have requested things like double speed playback or volume control. And
I'm raising my hand. I was the one who requested double speed playback.
Right, and there's a lot of requests for things, and there's a lot of potential for a player like that. And I think if more people had the ability to just put in their app and use and play anything, there might be some more work done on it. But the way it is right now, it's kind of hard to work on. It's using a service, so it's relatively modern, but it's done kind of wrapping this native audio control that's not actually embedded in the document anywhere. It's just like virtual. So I don't know. This may be another good place to try out an engine, but we'll see.
Yeah, but I'm really excited about that. And there's probably other little aspects of our system that are probably reusable elsewhere. But all in all, this is really a place for us to kind of experiment and really try to make sure that we kind of stay on top of the latest and greatest Ember stuff. So it's been really fun, and I don't know if all of this is necessary for a podcast, because we could just use Squarespace, but I think it's been really fun to really kind of make sure that Ember Weekend has, Ember at its core,
Yeah, definitely. I really feel like that's where most of my love goes towards is the site and the ability to funnel a bunch of the stuff we're learning and that we're talking about and that people tell us about and have like a central project we can go to, because at a consultancy we're rarely on a project for more than 6 months. So even if that is an Ember app, 6 months later you're on a different project. Sometimes, actually most of the time, less than that. So it's hard to be able to pull in the latest and greatest into anything. So having a long running personal project that we can always feel free to just play around with has been really a good experience.
Yeah. Well, and learning about the upgrade process in Ember land and experiencing the pain of, migrating from, I want to say this started like Ember CLI 0.35 or something like that, and pushing it all the way to 2.4, and, learning where the pain points are has been really helpful. And I've been able to pull a lot of that experience of upgrading Ember Weekend over into the consulting side too, where we get a lot of, older Ember apps and they need to be upgraded. And I'm like, oh yeah, I ran into this problem, doing Ember Weekend like 3 days ago, or, oh, we need to stub this acceptance test. Here's an example from Ember Weekend. And it's been pretty fun. So I just want to thank you, the listener, for this past year. It's been great. I've learned a lot. I think Chase and I have had a really good time putting all this together over the past year. And yeah, just wanted to say thanks. This has been great. It's been great learning from y'all, and I'm looking forward to the next year, and I'm looking forward to this EmberConf. I'll see you there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, see you at EmberConf, and like John said, don't be afraid to come up and ask us some questions. Let us know you liked an episode or something you want us to talk about, or just anything. I mean, we did this because we wanted to get more involved with the community, and so just come up and say hi if you see us. Thanks for listening to Ember Weekend. If you'd like to follow along, visit us at EmberWeekend.com.
Or you can find us at Ember Weekend, all one word, on Twitter, or subscribe via RSS.
I'm Chase McCarthy.
And I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And we'll see you at EmberConf.